The Colombian government and the ELN agreed to ease the return of displaced Embera communities to their place of origin. The Russian Ministry of Defense denounced that Ukraine is preparing a false flag attack to boycott the export of ammonia, a basic input for the production of fertilizers. And also, Israeli forces killed a young Palestinian man and injured 6 others in the Indonesia refugee camp south of Bethlehem. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. The government of Colombia and the ELN agreed to facilitate the return of displaced Embera people communities to their place of origin, the municipality of Murindo in Antioquia. The agreement has been possible thanks to the faith and the peace dialogues held by the Colombian government and the ELN in the Venezuelan capital. President Gustavo Pedro pointed out that this agreement must be implemented to other populations so that the return is possible throughout the national territory. He pointed out that the cessation of hostilities towards the population in Murindo is required so that this Afro and indigenous population can at least begin to live in peace, as a necessary step to find development options that benefit this excluded population. Gustavo Pedro, the president of Colombia, announced this Saturday that hundreds of young people who were imprisoned for participating in the social protests of 2021 will be released before Christmas Eve.
This place where fear melted and filled the space with fear must be restored. Here I announce that hundreds of young people arrested for participating in protests will be declared peace managers before Christmas Eve in Colombia. This government does not agree with youth, social and activist leaders who simply express themselves by keeping prisoners in Colombian jails when they have the right to spend Christmas with their families.
Now we address their topics. On Monday in Colombia, rescue forces continued the search and salvage labors after a bus was trapped by a landslide in Risaralda department. According to the National Roads Institute of Colombia, the vehicle carrying over 30 people was trapped in a section of the road between Cali and Quibdó on early morning on Sunday. So far, there are 3 fatalities, 9 people have been rescued alive, and it is estimated that more than 20 people are still missing. But authorities rule out the possibility of finding more people alive. According to local media, the rescue labors are being carried out in adverse conditions, as there is still intermittent rain and very unstable terrain. This situation is caused by the climatic event La Niña, which provokes heavy rains in winter, and its effects will be felt until February 2023. Locals in Indonesia were recovering items and rescuing livestock on Monday after an eruption from Mount Semeru in Lumajang district in East Java province. The event saw thick columns of ash more than 1,000 meters spew into the sky on Sunday. Villages and nearby towns were blanketed with falling ash, blocking out the sun, but no casualties have been reported. Buildings were covered in volcanic ash and belongings inside were buried. The improved weather conditions on Monday allowed rescuers to resume evacuation efforts and a search for possible victims after the highest volcano on Indonesia's most densely populated island erupted, triggered by monsoon rains. And a group of Santos Football Club fans held a vigil on Sunday in front of Sao Paulo Hospital, where football star Pelé is hospitalized. A group of approximately 75 fans, organized by the Torcida Jovem dos Santos, went to the Albert Einstein Hospital to express their support and pray for the recovery of Pelé's health. The fans remarked that although the star does not belong to Los Santos, but to the world, he was part of the institution, and that is why they pay their respects. They also extended a call to all his followers to join in prayer for the player. The Brazilian football star is receiving palliative care after his health condition deteriorated following a routine checkup on November 30th. In Mexico, the number of women who died due to an outbreak of fungal meningitis rose to 21. Research points to the painkiller they received during delivery. Public Health Secretariat confirmed on Sunday the figure of deaths in the state of Durango and assured that investigations are continuing to determine how the drugs they were given during childbirth were contaminated. As a result, the agency notified that the 4 hospitals that handled the contaminated drug were closed. Authorities reported that out of the 68 positive cases, some 47 remain under observation, of which 8 are in intensive care. They also reported that there are 3 out of every 10 positive patients have died, the large majority of them young women under 40. Cuban President Miguel DiazCanel arrived on Saturday in St. Vincent and the Grenadines on an official visit, the first stop on his Caribbean tour that includes Barbados and Grenada. During his stay in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, he had official talks with Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves, where they reviewed the current state of diplomatic and economic relations. Cuban president visited the Modern Medical and Diagnostic Center in Georgetown as a result of the collaboration between both nations. President Diaz-Canel's tour of Caribbean nations will include his participation along with several ministers in the 8th CARICOM-Cuba Summit to be held in Barbados next week. Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel thanks St. Vincent and the Grenadines for the gestures of solidarity.
You have kept, and particularly you have kept, a position of support to Cuba, systematically year after year by voting in favor of Cuba for the resolution that we have always submitted to the General Assembly of the United Nations against the blockade. In the most acute moment of the pandemic that we had in 2021, we received solidarity help from San Vicente and the Grenadines with a group of important supplies for our health, and we have also received your help when we have experienced difficult moments, such as a group of accidents and meteorological events that we have faced in the last year.
And Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves, through a message on his Twitter account, thanked the Cuban president for his visit. The Prime Minister reported a tour to the AIA, which benefits significantly from the generosity of the Cuban government and people. The bonds of friendship between the two countries are stronger than ever. Let's take a short break, but first, remember you can follow us on our TikTok account at Telesur English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The Russian Ministry of Defense denounced that Ukraine is preparing a false flag attack to boycott the export of ammonia, a basic input for the production of fertilizers. According to sources, the plan is to detonate the ammonia storage vaults at the OPEC plant, as well as the gas transshipment infrastructure as present in the effect of the Russian missiles. With this attack, Kyiv will intend to prevent Russia from supplying ammonia to other nations, increasing the price of gas and allowing British and US suppliers to increase the volume of ammonia production and export. The media claim that this provocation is planned and coordinated by representatives of the secret services of the United Kingdom, as well as personnel of the Canadian private company Grenadines. The president of Turkey Recep Tayyip Erdogan defends the idea of extending the Russian grain pact due to expire on December 19th. Tayyip also hopes to meet with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin to extend the agreement for another year and incorporate the export of Russian fertilizers and ammonia into the new one. On July 22nd, Turkey signed a package of 2 agreements to solve the issue of food and fertilizer supplies in the international markets. Meanwhile, the United Nations pledged to lift all the sanctions imposed on the Russian nation over the export of food and fertilizers. Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak said the cabinet will develop a mechanism to prevent the export of oil and limited prices, even if this means reducing domestic production. During a press conference, the Deputy Prime Minister explained that Moscow will sell oil and oil products to those countries that work together with the Kremlin in terms of market. Novak stressed that his country considers that these mechanisms for regulating crude oil prices does not respond to the laws of the market. It is inefficient and contrary to the rules of the World Trade Organization. The Deputy Prime Minister also said that limiting oil prices could lead to greater instability and a shortage of energy resources and other market products, which will affect not only Russia but also other countries. The Ministerial Monitoring Committee of Oil Exporting Countries Organization and its allies, OPEC+, decided to keep the current production cut level at 2 million barrels per day. According to a press release, the members of the Oil Alliance reaffirmed the decision taken during the 10th ministerial meeting, held on April 12, 2020, and endorsed in several meetings. Participating countries recognize this measure as necessary and correct in order to stabilize the global oil markets. Likewise, OPEC+ confirmed that the next meeting will be held on June the 4th, 2023. However, they did not rule out holding it earlier, if necessary, in order to address the evolution of the oil market. In Italy, Prime Minister Giorgio Milani presented this Sunday her country's strategy to face both migration and energy crisis. During her speech at the 8th edition of the so-called Med Dialogues, the president pointed out that in order to face the migration problem, more Europe is needed in the southern front, something Italy has been claiming for some time now. In this respect, Milani expressed the need to develop the southern dimension of Europe's neighborhood policy, transforming it into a true Mediterranean partnership involving African and Asian nations of the Mediterranean Sea. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Israeli forces killed a young Palestinian man and injured 6 others on Monday in the Deisha refugee camp south of Bethlehem. The news agency Wafa reported, citing local sources, that a sizable army force barged in its way into the southern Palestine refugee camp and ransacked several houses, triggering confrontations. The heavily armed Israeli soldiers opened fire towards local young men, killing Omar Mana Faraja with a live round in his chest and wounding 6 others. By the time the raid was over, 4 people were detained, including Faraja's brother. According to the health ministry's statistics, the number of Palestinians killed by Israeli forces since the start of 2022 reached 212, 160 of whom from the West Bank and 52 others from the besieged Gaza Strip. Iranian authorities announced the construction of a nuclear power plant in the southwestern province of Khuzestan. The Iranian Atomic Energy Organization head Mohammad Islami launched on Saturday the construction operation of Korun nuclear power plant, which will have a capacity to generate some 300 megawatts of electricity. The head of the Atomic Energy Organization assured that the plant will be built exclusively by Iranian companies, and the project will take only 8 years. Islami also detailed that the plant will cost some $2 billion and will occupy some 50 hectares in the vicinity of the Karun River. In the United States, the Department of Defense announced that it will strengthen its military presence in the Indo-Pacific despite Beijing's warnings. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said on Saturday during the National Defense Forum that he will adopt a posture of lethal and distributed force in the Indo-Pacific. The Defense Secretary stressed that China represents a challenge on both a regional and global scale, admitting that the Asian giant is the only country capable of reshaping the international order. Austin also said that in the face of Chinese military's modernization program, Washington and its allies will respond by strengthening their military presence in the region. This despite the fact that on repeated occasions China has called for dialogue and respectful relations with Western nations based on mutual benefit. In Morocco, activists from left-wing political and trade union organizations demonstrated in Rabat on Sunday to protest rising prices. Thousands took to the streets also to protest against the repression of freedom of expression, corruption, and the kingdom's normalization of ties with Israel in December 2020. Consumer price inflation was 8.1% year-on-year in October, due to large part to surging food prices, which were up 14.7%. Fuel prices have also risen sharply. During a press conference on Sunday, the head of the Economic Community of West African States Commission said West African leaders have told Mali's ruling junta to release 46 Ivorian troops taken prisoner in July.
Have also expressed concern over the continued detention of 46 Ivorian soldiers in Mali and call on Malian authorities to release the soldiers latest 1st of January 2023. In the event the soldiers are not released quickly, the leaders reserve the right and they have taken the decision to take certain measures.
And just as the hearts of millions of fans live the emotions of the Qatar 2022 World Cup, Telesur joins this sporting event with From the Field, a show that brings news, analysis, reviews, and more to our audience. Don't miss it. Our show airs 1 p.m. local time in Caracas and 12 p.m. New York. Remember, From the Field, only on Telesur. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. For Telesur English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.